I would like to have feminism recognized as the hate ideology that it really is, and for it to be discredited.
Hi, and welcome to, or back to, my channel where I offer my thoughts and opinions about whatever catches my attention. I'm Kit, and today, per request, we're looking at a video from Laura Howe, The Truth About Feminism's Impact on Marriage and Men with Janice Fiamengo. Longtime subscribers might remember Janice from the Make Women Great Again convention where she was one of the speakers. Other than that, Janice's claim to fame is, well, direct from her Substack bio. I am a retired professor of English with a long-running video series about the fraud of feminism. As for Laura, per her channel bio, Laura Howe is a relationship therapist specializing in sexless marriage and female sexual desire in long-term relationships. Very curious as to how she ended up here chatting with Janice Fiamengo of all people about feminism, but okay. So the video opens with both women saying they used to think feminism was a force for good, but they no longer believe that. And it's a bit funny because I used to be like these two, but the opposite. Until I was about 30, I did the I'm not a feminist but dance because I thought feminism was about hating men. Why did I think that? I have no idea. I hadn't looked into feminism at all, though looking back at the media of the time, I can hazard a guess as to where I picked up those thoughts. And it wasn't from feminists. Anyway.
One of the things I noticed when I started really listening to what feminists say about what they want and what they believe is that the terms love and cherish almost never come up, particularly when applied to men.
As someone who's read a fair amount of feminist books, articles, watched a fair amount of feminist videos, I agree. But why would it? Why would I go into a feminist piece of work expecting the creator to talk about loving and cherishing men? I wish Janice would go further into this and explain why she was looking for that in feminism.
And that was the thing that began to niggle at me after many years in which I called myself a feminist.
I'm sorry, but is Janice saying she needs someone else to tell her that she should love and cherish other people?
And I taught at various universities, and it began to strike me that even though all of the measurable goals of the feminist movement had clearly been attained.
I also wish Janice would go further into this and explain what she thinks those goals were and how she considers them completed.
Feminists didn't seem to be any happier about the state of the world, and in fact it seemed to me that they were as angry or even angrier than they had ever been.
Is it possible, just possible, that those feminists Janice considered angrier than they've ever been did not consider feminism complete and thus obsolete? Also, seriously, how can Janice say feminism's goals have been attained? Does she look at the news at all?
Very keen on lecturing men on toxic masculinity and everything else. Very keen on telling men what they owed to women, which seemed to be everything.
Really? I would like to know what she was consuming. And why do they never clarify? Obviously, I haven't read or seen every piece on feminism ever created, but it would be really helpful for anti-feminists to share what they've read that made them anti-feminist. But speaking from my bookshelf, there's only one book that mentions men, and it's Men Who Hate Women by Laura Bates. But it's not to men, it's not a lecture to men, it's a simple statement of, this is something men are doing. And if that is considered lecturing men, well, if men don't want to be lectured, maybe they could stop killing us. I know, I go too far, I ask for too much. And yes, I know, most men don't murder women, but a lot of men like to trade on the idea that they could, and I am so fucking sick of it.
And many men were quite willing to try to give to women what they were demanding.
What were we demanding? Can we please stop being vague? I really, really think they do it on purpose. Or they really have no idea what they're talking about, so they have to be vague because they can't point to specifics.
But not at all keen in talking about what women owed to men.
What do women owe to men? Is it different from what men owe to women? I would like to note before the comments come in that I don't think men or women owe each other anything beyond basic courtesy. Obviously, if you're family, friends, lovers, whatever, that will be different, but in general, no, random men don't owe random women anything beyond basic courtesy, and the same goes for random women to random men.
And certainly not interested in talking about what men had given to women over the centuries.
Really? What did men give to women over the centuries?
why gender roles had developed as they did in times when the survival of the human race was much more challenging than it is today.
What does Janice think gender roles are, and when does she think they originated?
And, not at all interested in talking about gratitude or in praising men for the changes in society and in the social order that men had been willing to give to him.
So, to be clear, men, yes, I am aware men alive today didn't create patriarchy, but they did and do benefit from it, create a system that took rights from women. And women are supposed to be grateful they got some rights they fought for, were imprisoned for, died for. They weren't just given back.
And so that lack of gratitude, that anger, that accusatory tone, all of those began to really turn me off. And I also finally, I think the sort of assertion of female moral superiority really got to me as well. It was as if no matter what the situation, it was impossible for feminists to admit that women ever did wrong. And also, of course, as I just said, impossible for them to admit that men ever did right.
The idea that women are morally superior to men is a bioessentialist thing, and though there are feminists who believe in that, I am really curious as to how they can square the belief that men are one way and women are another with their feminism. Part of the point is that people shouldn't be restricted or prescribed roles because of their sex, and putting them in a sex-based box is a restriction.
And it began to strike me that feminism actually brought out the worst in women, exacerbating the qualities in feminine nature that are not conducive to social flourishing, and suppressing the qualities in female nature that are conducive to social flourishing, such as the empathy that we always hear about. Seems to me that feminism suppresses that.
Empathy is one of the reasons I'm a feminist. Go figure.
It makes women focus on grievance.
Ah, yes. Only women talk about their grievances. Seriously, this is ridiculous. It's like the people who see my videos and are like, OMG, she just complains, she must be the worst and everyone hates her. And it's like, can you not separate one activity from regular life? Of course, if someone is writing a book, giving a speech, making a video about something, they're going to talk about that something. It does not then follow that that is the only thing they ever talk about or the only interest they have. Good grief. Anyway, I really recommend The Age of Grievance by Frake Bruni.
It brings out the entitlement mentality that some women have. It, I think, exacerbates envy and discontent and anger. It leaches away loving kindness and softness and nurturing. And for all the talk of how women are the ones who care for the weak, it seemed to me that it takes away caring from women.
So anyone can call themselves a feminist. Angry people, entitled people, mean people, whoever. But I assume Janice is saying feminism makes people that way, and I would really like to know how she figures that. Feminism hasn't made me more one way or another, except that I try to think twice before I speak because I don't want to uphold sexist norms. And yes, that includes against men. And I try to ask more questions of why I'm doing whatever it is I'm doing.
And so I really began to question whether feminism was really what feminists said it was, whether it was really a movement for equality, because I couldn't see very much equality. I couldn't see any mutuality, any reciprocal commitment, any equal caring for men and boys.
At its core, feminism is about equality, though different feminists focus on different things. And I would say that, yes, it's about advocating for legal, social, financial, etc. equality, and also examining how those inequalities came about so we can understand how best to unravel them and ensure they don't happen again. But it does start with you. If you don't examine yourself, change the way you interact with the world, you're not going to get very far. And really, the only thing you can for sure change is yourself. And that's a big step towards social change. All that to say, feminism isn't about dictating to others how they should behave. And if someone says, I'm a feminist and I have to tell you how to live your life, or you'll do it wrong or in a way I don't agree with, ask yourself, how does that liberate anyone from anything? If someone says, I'm a feminist and women are morally superior and men should be kept in cages, ask yourself, well, how does that liberate anyone from anything, but also, how does that honor the full spectrum of humanity found in, I don't know, humans? Anti-feminism content is so easy to counter if people would just spend a second learning what feminism is instead of believing what people who are against it tell them it is. Okay, let's get back to the video, and hopefully I can make it through the rest without pausing every 2 seconds.
And I began to read more deeply into feminism, even going back to the very early years of the feminist movement, way back to Mary Wollstonecraft in 1792 and Elizabeth Cady Stanton at the Declaration of Sentiments in Seneca Falls in 1848. And I was struck there by the anger and the accusation and the conviction of female moral superiority. And so that's when I really began to just to question everything that I had believed.
You're telling me that people being denied the full expression of their humanity are angry at the people denying them that expression? I'm shocked. Anyway, the early feminists did have a thing about TLDR, the men drink, they murder, they steal, and you're going to let them vote, but not us, the angels of the house, the moral arbiters of society? And that was their angle. And it has since been 234 years since the vindication of the rights of women. We, not just feminists, but society in general, have learned and changed a lot since then. Anyway, that is the end of Janice's feminist adventure, and Laura asks a weird, in my opinion, question. She wants to know why that hasn't taken hold and why it isn't more widely known. And what is she talking about? What is the it? I guess it doesn't really matter because Janice's answer doesn't make much sense.
For one thing, I think the answer is that men have always cared about women's experience and women's safety and well-being.
Really? So then why is homicide the leading cause of death for pregnant women? Why is the most dangerous place for a woman in her own home?
Which contradicts the fundamental premise of feminism.
I'm so curious as to what Janice thinks that fundamental premise is.
And that's to me, the interesting contradiction at the heart of feminism, that it constantly cries out about injustice to women and makes claims about male indifference, male tyranny, male brutality. But if it were true, at the same time as it makes those claims, it is demanding change. Now, if it were true that men were actually as feminists claim they are, it would be useless to make those demands because the men would not respond.
Oh, wait. Janice is saying that if men were as bad as feminism claims, side note, feminism doesn't say men are bad, it talks about patriarchy, capitalism, white supremacy as forces of oppression, but I guess we're pretending it's just about how men are the root of all evil, which they are not, and it's short-sighted and pointless to believe so. Anyway, if men were as bad as feminism claims, feminism would be pointless because the men wouldn't listen to them and nothing would change. So I guess men must be inherently good and interested in women, which would also render feminism meaningless because women and marginalized peoples wouldn't have to form movements for their rights because men would just give them to them anyway, eventually. Well, that is definitely a thought. I would love for Janice to ask herself why men are being appealed to in her imaginings as the giver of rights. But anyway, Janice says that anytime feminists have a demand, it's been given, and she still doesn't seem to realize a disconnect between what she's saying, and she encourages us to look at the Declaration of Sentiments, which she considers essentially a declaration of war on men. To be fair, Janice is Canadian, so to my 5% Canadian audience, would you say Canada is the bastion of equality, not just gender equality, but equality, that Janice seems to believe it to be? I have doubts. Anyway, can someone please tell Janice that some women being allowed to do something does not mean that that was something open and available to all women? Janice is so dishonest. But she did speak at the Make Women Great Again convention, so I shouldn't be surprised.
They do respond when women cry out in pain.
Why are women crying out in pain?
And I ask feminists this when I used to be on Twitter. I've kind of given it up lately, but I used to ask this: what do women owe men? Do they owe them anything?
Everyone owes everyone a basic courtesy. That is all.
Do women care about the issues that affect men?
Yes. That is why I have men's groups in my video descriptions. That is why I donate to Male Survivor. That is why I call out sexism and people like Janice, who sound as though they're standing up for men, but in reality, they just want men to sit in the man box they've been placed in, and then they use those men to discredit women's experiences. Janice goes on to talk about men's struggles, and yes, men do have struggles. That does not then negate women's. And this is what infuriates me most. Janice doesn't care. She's not going to even spare a second thought about men once she's off camera. Her job is to come in, misrepresent feminism, tell men they actually have it worse and should hate feminism, and then go. She talks about men's struggles, but what is she doing to actually help? Does she at least hold space for the men in her life to come to her with their struggles? I have doubts when it comes to people who want to uphold the status quo. The status quo doesn't allow men or women to be fully human. And that is harmful.
They're talking about a gender pay gap that doesn't actually exist at all.
Setting aside that Janice goes on to contradict herself as she admits it does exist, and setting aside that it's possible for people to care about multiple things, yes, the wage gap is real, and no, it's not because men are just better at paid employment. And by the way, that affects your whole life. It's not just that it's not fair, but it also affects your retirement, if you're able to retire, how you can spend your old age, how you can respond to emergencies.
So, there's so much dishonesty.
I would advise Janice to look in a mirror.
I'm older now. I grew up in the 1970s when feminism was, at least the second wave of feminism was going strong. I experienced nothing in my life but kindness, generosity, and support from my male teachers, mentors, friends, etc.
That is wonderful for Janice. I'm really glad that was her experience. That does not, however, give her the authority to invalidate or ignore the experiences of other women. And you know what? I've also had loving and supportive men in my life. And that is one of the reasons I'm a feminist. I want them to be able to fully embrace their humanity as well. I have spent nights talking them off that ledge, and I have seen how patriarchal rules and expectations harm men. And then they apologize for daring to show emotion, and it just breaks my heart because, no, you're human. It's natural, and especially so around people you care about and who care for you. And that is why I don't hate Janice, but I hate what she's doing. She's not only trying to convince men that women aren't oppressed, but she's trying to coax them into being complicit in their own suppression because her life is comfortable and therefore everything must be fine.
And to start talking about how we can work together as men and women to build a good society, and a society that is good for raising children, which seems to be the most important thing that we could have as a society. And I don't think we have that now.
I agree, but we're not going to build a better society by ignoring what's wrong in the current one.
Like this notion that there is a pervasive misogyny in our society that we must continually address. I've never seen that. I have not met a misogynistic man.
Oh, she is such a liar. Or perhaps she's merely ignorant, which would be very sad. Does Janice not consider Andrew Johnson, as well as the other speakers at the Make Women Great Again convention, misogynists? Or does Janice not know what misogyny is?
I know I'm not saying that there aren't any at all, but that is not the general nature of men.
Agreed.
I agree men are not born misogynists, but they, and women, are born into a misogynistic society and thus must unlearn misogyny.
So I think it is a particular temptation of women to feel themselves under threat and then to think of themselves as victims. In our society in particular, a victim is somebody who is very authentic. We tend to listen to victims. We tend to give them a lot of respect. We call them survivors. We praise them for their courage, all those sorts of things. And so it's a quite pleasant experience to proclaim one's victimhood.
I have some harsh words in mind, but all I will say is that this attitude is how we get something like the Epstein files and people just shrug their shoulders and nothing happens. The little everyday things like men murdering their partners don't even get that.
And along with it comes moral authenticity and purity. The victim is not responsible for anything she's done wrong, for any failures in her life. It's somebody else's responsibility. So she is unimpeachable and pure.
Yeah, victims get so much respect, says someone who freely admits that she's never faced adversity.
And then what happens as a result of that is that every experience gets filtered through the victim lens.
It's called trauma. Oh my God.
And so then that becomes all you see. It's quite a satisfying worldview. And I'm speaking from personal experience. I found it very exhilarating when I was a university student to believe in the collective victimization of women.
What? No, it's not satisfying. It's depressing. It's exhausting. It's not exhilarating to always have to be on alert. It's not fun to explain why you have to be vigilant about your surroundings.
And what it does then is it leeches empathy away. You do not feel any empathy for those that you see as, not me. You will have empathy for others in your victim group, but certainly not for those that you perceive as privileged, oppressive, etc. no empathy at all, and you even feel quite justified in taking revenge.
Citation fucking needed.
On those people. You think they should suffer. You certainly don't care about their suffering. And a just world to you may seem like one in which they experience what you think your group has experienced. And that's exactly what feminism produces. And
Oh, this woman is so full of shit. Feminism doesn't create vengeful women. You know what does? Harm. It's so interesting, though, how she talks about how society is just so respectful of victims. And here she is, dismissing them as having no real reason for their pain, no real reason for their anger.
I would like to have feminism recognized as the hate ideology that it really is, and for it to be discredited.
The only way to do that is to completely invent a new definition for feminism, which Janice is happy to do. And that is why I ask everyone to please think twice before they believe something, especially if that something is easy to believe. And I know folks like to think that feminism comes naturally to women, but no. I had to reconsider everything I thought I knew and change how I interact with the world and the people in it. It's not easy. It's something I have to do every day, but it's worth it to be the person I want to be and to help create a better world.
I think most men, whether they are themselves good or bad, still know what a good man is. They have a pretty clear idea of who a good man is, what a good man does. A good man, of course, he protects and provides for his family, but he also pursues justice in the world. He defends the weak, he defeats evil. That we still have a very clear sense of what goodness looks like in a man.
And why doesn't providing for and protecting their family, defending the weak, pursuing justice, defeating evil make a good woman? Why is that only a good man?
Now, feminists might say, well, it should look the same in a woman.
Do go on.
But I don't think our history shows that to be true. Traditionally, certainly, virtue looked a little bit different in a woman. There were women warriors and women who stepped out to defeat evil in the world. But in general, the sphere of female virtue was in the home, and it had to do with the virtues of loyalty and loving kindness and nurturing of children and being a helpmeet to one's husband and being chaste. And, it had to do with particular feminine virtues. And there was a very clear idea of what a good woman was up until the 1960s.
If you tell people this is what is expected of you and they do it, it does not then follow that such things are natural and they would have done it without being told. Also, Janice spends most of the episode talking about the struggles of boys and men, and also of how good they are. However, apparently loyalty and loving kindness aren't masculine traits. Does she not think boys and men are capable of doing those things? That those things shouldn't be expected of them? Why?
Since feminism now, a good woman is, I don't know what a feminist would even say.
Well, I appreciate Janice admitting that she doesn't talk to feminists. Will that change anything for the anti-feminists loving this conversation? Nope.
She'd be a woman who she smashes the patriarchy, she smashes convention, she pursues her desires, she overthrows conventions and ideas about what a woman should be. And I think that is part of the problem, is that we don't have a notion of goodness anymore.
How does Janice figure that? But anyway, she's stressing herself out about something she made up. Everyone, feminist or not, will have a different idea about what makes a good person, but that is what is key. A good person, not a good man, not a good woman. Goodness is not predicated on sex. A good person is someone, in my opinion, who has integrity, is kind, just, diligent, has the courage of their convictions, and even if they don't meet all those qualifiers, they're actively trying to make the world a better place. It's not gendered. Why would it be?
To actually be a decent person on a day-to-day basis and care for people and put your own needs second, that it's boring a lot of the time because it involves humility and self-forgetfulness, but it does ultimately lead to a much greater sense of life satisfaction. And so I think, we need to encourage that in both women and men, and encourage that mutual caring for one another is the only route to true happiness.
So it's not gendered then. Why not just say this instead of, oh, she had to talk about how women used to know how to be good, but now they're just selfish whores with no shame, while men still know how to be good. Never mind.
And yeah, it's a hard sell, I think, in a culture that really valorizes female anger and female complaint.
Women should be angry, and so should men. We're being stolen from, and the capitalists are lying to our faces about it.
And so I think, there is also the question not only of convincing women that the kinds of goals that feminism offers them are not really conducive to any genuine happiness and life satisfaction.
Feminism doesn't offer women goals. It's not a workplace.
But I think we also have to think about changing some of the laws, perhaps. It seems that no-fault divorce, for example, has been quite a disaster. I mean, what does it mean if you can enter into a covenant, a very important arrangement, and then one person can decide that they're no longer interested and they go?
There is a lot of talk these days about ending no-fault divorce, and I'm so curious. Why do they think divorce rates spiked once it was legal? Do they think it was happy, contented marriages that were ending? But honestly, no-fault divorce led to a decline in female suicide, a decline in domestic violence, and a decline in women being murdered by their husbands. And no such benefit for men. No-fault divorce benefits women, and that is why people, including women, want to overturn it. But though I know the people who need to hear this won't, I would like anyone thinking it would be great to be able to make their spouse stay to consider what it would be like to be married to someone who doesn't want to be married to them.
What does it mean for the men who are now worried about getting into relationships with women, that they know that at any moment they can lose everything? They can lose their money. They can be criminalized. If the woman makes an accusation against her husband, really, there's no evidence needed. It will be taken very seriously in a family court. He may lose access to his children. He may never see his children again, depending on how things work out. He may have to keep on paying for a house he no longer lives in while he himself devolves into penury. It's astounding what we've now made the norm.
None of that is the norm, and Janice should be ashamed of herself. 10% of divorces involve alimony. Child custody is decided by the parents in 90% of cases. When fathers ask for custody, they typically receive it, and women are more likely than men to suffer financially in the aftermath of a divorce.
I think that yes, that we if we're to do well as a species, it seems obvious to me that we restore faith in one another. That there is some, are we to believe that nature made such a mistake in human beings? It didn't with all of the animals. So the penguins don't have a man problem. In all the other realms of existence in life forms, we don't have this concern.
What? I am so baffled by how anyone can take this seriously. Laura also says something about the natural order, and she's supposed to be a relationship therapist? Laura urges people to read the Declaration of Sentiments and just...
Yes, that's one of the documents, a founding document of feminism that really profoundly reveals the rage at the heart of these allegedly oppressed women who felt very confident, even as early as 1848, to lecture men about their tyranny and to demand that an immediate end be put to it. Well, that doesn't seem like victims of tyranny to me, and indeed they weren't.
So, to be clear, if you're protesting, the fact that you're doing it means whatever you're protesting doesn't exist. If they don't shoot you on sight for daring to step out of line, everything is fine. I can understand, to a certain extent, the appeal of this sort of content. It asks nothing of you. Sure, Janice talks about what it means to be a good man, but she also says that men, by and large, are inherently good and are unfairly maligned and ignored by society, despite the evidence to the contrary. And no, that doesn't mean I think men are evil or don't struggle. Janice is just overlooking everything we know in order to do the men are the actual victim grift. And it must be a worthwhile one, considering how common it is. But it is interesting that the people who loudly speak about men's struggles, none of them come up with anything new. They look at men, they see them struggling, and they tell them to keep doing what they've been doing. But sure, they really care, and feminists are the evil ones for saying men are human. I know exactly who needs to hear this, and that they probably won't listen, but neither Laura nor Janice care about men. They just know flattering men's egos will get them money, and so that's what they do. And that's it for this video. My socials and Patreon are linked below, along with sources and resources. I would like to thank everyone for watching through to the end, and of course, I would like to give extra thanks to my patrons. Have a wonderful day, please check out the links below, and I'll see you in the next one.